UK, just over 3 out of 4 suicides are by men. It's the biggest cause of death for men under 50. The highest suicide rate recorded in 2018 was for men aged 45 to 49. 12.5% of men are suffering from one of the common mental health disorders: depression, anxiety, phobia, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and panic disorder. Statistics show the number of men who complete suicide each day in the UK is 12. The male suicide rate is at its lowest in over 30 years, but still, any number is too high. In this documentary, people have come together to tell their stories in an effort to try and help diminish the stigma of male mental health. To stand up and say it's okay not to be okay. To forget the phrase man up and know it's okay to man down. We all need help sometimes, and help is here. After years of depression and manic phases, Julian was at university. He parked his car alongside a busy road near Nottingham and began to walk into the forest, where he laid down and waited to die. It was the middle of winter.
That culminated in me basically losing all of my toes through frostbite, a mixture of frostbite and trench foot, because of the effects of the exposure. But before it got any worse, I sort of, in a way, I suppose, had the survival instinct kicked in and forced me to get up.
Days later, with his condition rapidly declining due to the wet conditions and freezing temperatures, Julian dragged himself off of the floor and staggered to a nearby service station, where he saw a member of the public who called an ambulance. In 2009, at the age of 25, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
That was a turning point, because before then I hadn't actually been diagnosed, but I had been going through periods of confusion with my mental health. Since being diagnosed, I've learned a lot more about the condition that I have, and I feel that helps me to deal with, or at least helps me by understanding it. I can recognise it, and even by recognising it, then straight away you're onto a winner, because then you can do something about it, even if it's going to see the doctor or just speaking to my parents or speaking to friends. I've developed a good network of sort of friends that I trust, that I can speak to about how I'm feeling. Once I'd actually found out what this thing that had been affecting me was, then it was important to me to understand it, and I know that I can't master it or get rid of it, but at least I can work with it and not let it control me like it used to.
Julian wants to tell people to reach out to others and ask for help. At the point of rock bottom, he still had that survival instinct, and after all he has been through, he has got his life back.
It's the single most important thing that I could say to anyone. Open up to anyone, someone. You don't even need to know them. It could be a stranger in the street. You can't get over it by yourself. If you're in that kind of a hole, you will never sort of cope with it, and you shouldn't be expected to. People get there for all sorts of different reasons. I particularly didn't have any sort of trauma or tragedy to lead me there. Like I said, I think throughout my university I'd been on a lot of highs, and eventually I was dumped down to a huge low. That's just how, with my condition, it works, that you go highs and lows, but I just had such a large period of highs. I guess in a way I probably burnt out physically and mentally, and then eventually your body, can't cope, and it dropped me down to, as I say, the very darkest sort of period of my life.
As a child, Gregory's biological father attacked and stabbed his mother. This is a memory that is ingrained in his head and one that has haunted him all his life.
The morning that happened, I remember vividly in my head, and my mum did all she could so that I could go to school. And when I got to school, I went straight to the headmistress's office and said something was wrong and that they needed to call the police and go home to my mum and my brother, who was in the house at the time. But unfortunately, it was a bit too late, and my biological father had, in the time that I'd left the house to go to school and got to school and got someone to call the police, he stabbed her in that time. Between those three, if we were having a competition of hardest moments, I don't really think I could probably pick one. Certainly the two more recent occasions that I mentioned are more vivid and more, I guess, when you think about mental health, and I guess why I'm trying to tell the stories that I've got, is essentially to try and just be honest and show people that you can talk.
Gregory has been admitted to the mental health unit in hospital twice.
The second admission to hospital was, for me, extremely difficult, because the first time I thought I was in the wrong place and I didn't really give it the time of day, and I didn't consider myself to be mentally ill. The second time was a real realisation that, if I didn't try and get a handle on certain things, that I probably would have, I didn't purposely attempt suicide. However, I took all of my tablets for a month in one day, and when I was admitted to the hospital, I was on suicide watch, and it was kind of a realisation in me that although I didn't have a conscious thought in my head to try and end my life, I was in such a low place that it didn't really make a difference to me one way or the other.
Unlucky, Nick! Go, come on, in there, shape again.
And I'd never really taken time to comprehend exactly what had occurred, and I think it was probably in the second week, on my second time in hospital, that I had a real conversation with myself, and also my doctor and psychiatrist and some of the people that you get to help you in those situations, where I had to really go, this has got to stop. And when you're in that type of place, you're the last one to realise, and that's the hardest thing, because you have so many things that you should be positive and proud, and all the things that you associate with happiness, and but until you realise yourself what those things are and what they mean to you, and you're just in a constant cycle of self-loathe, it's a very scary thing when you do have that moment and you go, Jesus, I need to really have a few really conscious, clear thoughts about what it is that is actually occurring here. So on my first visit to hospital, to the mental health unit, I was diagnosed as recurrent manic depressive with bipolar tendencies, which, when you first get told something like that, it's a bit hard to understand because it's different in every single person, and yeah, it takes a while to either accept it and understand that there's certain things in life then going forward that you probably need to do a bit differently. And it's not that you can't do everything everyone else can do, it's just some of it takes a bit more thought and a bit more recognition in your own mind of what it is that you're actually dealing with. If I'm honest, the last 2 days, it's the first time since August last year that I've really struggled to get up and go to work and function, and there's a number of reasons for that. One of them being that it was close to the anniversary of the first time that I went into hospital, and I think the other things are just normal everyday life occurrences that anyone, not you or me or any person, that you either get sad and upset about it for a little while and the feeling goes and things are all right, or if you're not always wired up properly, or however you want to describe it, it can take a bit longer. Equally, I have gone to work and I have been doing the things I should do, and that is meant to be a sign that there's some way forward. But I'm well aware that it's not going to, that last 2 days, it's not going to dictate to me how this weekend's going to go. And I've got my son and got a daughter upstairs, and they're going to have a nice weekend with me.
Right, let's go and have a bit of a splash. Yeah? Do you want me to carry the bucket? You're going to carry it. You're stronger. You certainly are, mate.
I'm not going to lie and say that it's not sometimes still a struggle. Sometimes things still do get me and get to me, and it's about me and my choices that I make when I'm feeling a bit down. Whether the negative committee, as I call it, that's my name for my illness, which I guess is a little bit mad on its own, but that's okay because I'm in a place where I accept certain things. Whether they're going to decide what I'm going to be doing all weekend, and I'm now, touch wood, still I'm lucky enough to be able to make a choice. A lot of friends and a lot of people are not as fortunate, and I think that's one thing that in a weird way sometimes can be the best therapy for someone, is actually taking a step back and recognising that there are a lot of people in this world that don't have the opportunity or the chance to have a basic quality of life. And when I feel worst, which, like I said, the last 2 days is the first time since August where I've really felt a bit down. But I still have a choice. I still have options. I can still go to work. I've got a beautiful family and wonderful friends that are there. But I think sometimes when someone is really unwell, they can be next to you, but it can seem like, being thousands of miles away.
Gregory's mother was terminally ill and tragically passed away following a long illness in 2017. This left a massive hole in his family and in his heart.
She was terminally ill, so it's kind of one of those where you almost think you can plan for it, but I didn't ever comprehend quite how much it would affect me. She was my best friend and a woman that went through so much to give my brother and I opportunities that even the most lucky people don't have and didn't have. And it's not that it doesn't control me anymore. Most days I now smile when I think about her, and I've had a good period of time, you know, consecutive weeks where I haven't had negative thoughts of suicide, thoughts of not being good enough.
He talks about his struggles and how his children are a big part of his ongoing recovery.
Feeling guilty towards my 2 eldest children and guilty towards my youngest, that, you know, I wasn't in a very good place when he came into this world. But I'd like to think that I'm getting now back towards a place where Mum would be proud of me again. And Zayden, I see him, you know, well, 50% of the week, and I see the joy that he has when we're together, and I can only hope that one day, hopefully quite soon, I get to have those days with Rowan and Violet again. But it's hard.
Ben grew up with a strong Christian upbringing. Originally from Bristol, his family moved to Guernsey for a fresh start.
I had a brilliant upbringing. I had 3 sisters, well, I got 3 sisters, and, you know, my mum and my dad, they moved to Guernsey. You know, I've got no complaints in that regard. You know, I never really had to struggle with adversity in my life. You know, everything went pretty swimmingly.
Throughout his teenage years, Ben felt like he didn't have any direction or purpose in life.
It wasn't really until I started getting into my late teens, I was kind of struggling to find a place. I was struggling with motivation. There was a lot of self-hatred there, and, you know, I never fully understood why. You know, I just kind of got on with it, and, you know, I drank a lot. I did a lot of drugs. Anything to kind of get that escapism that I needed to kind of get outside my own head. You know, I was always, you know, when I wasn't high or drunk or doing whatever, you know, I was, you know, it was like a nightmare in my head. And, you know, that had always kind of been the norm for me. I'd never thought too much about it. I just thought, oh, this is what it's like. You know, you just need to fill your life with all these, you know, abusive behaviours in order to feel normal and to fit in. And you know, that was me up until in my early 20s. I was kind of in between Guernsey and the UK.
Ben became a father for the first time in 2009, and he turned his life around. He progressed through his career to support his daughter and to give her the best chance in life.
It's nothing that brings you back down to earth and gives you a sense of responsibility and gets you outside your own head and your own, you know, your own selfish ways than having a kid. And really, ever since Phoebe was born, you know, everything fell into place in terms of my career. And you know, for the first time in my life, I really felt like I had a purpose. I felt like, you know, this little girl, you know, means everything to me. And things, you know, started falling into place in my life.
In 2013, Ben found out his mother had been diagnosed with cancer.
They were living in the UK. My parents and my sisters were in the UK. I was in Guernsey at this point in time working and, you know, being a dad. And, you know, I didn't really, you know, it was a huge shock. But, you know, when you find something like that out, you just, you know, I did expect the best. I thought, you know, Mum and Dad had always been so strong since I was a kid that, you know, they were just going to get through this. And, you know, it wasn't, you know, it was scary, and, you know, of course I was worried and I was upset at times, but, you know, I really just thought, you know, God's going to take care of this, and you know, everything's going to be fine. Mum's going to be better soon. And it was, as time went on, you know, it got progressively worse. It spread from a bowel to a liver. And, you know, before I knew it, I was in the UK at the hospice watching my mum die. and visually, emotionally, it was like nothing else. You know, I didn't take it in my stride. I was a mess every day. I could barely go in and see her, even though, you know, I did spend a lot of time talking to her. She was so heavily sedated as well. You know, it was you know, there weren't massive conversations, but they were very poignant and short conversations, and it was an incredibly emotional time, you know, and like I said before, you know, I'd never had to deal with something like this, really.
His mother's condition worsened rapidly, spreading through her body, and she tragically passed away.
You know, I just remember looking at her, you know, moments, you know, when she had moments left, and holding her hand, and she was, you know, skinny. You know, she couldn't have weighed more than 5-6 stone. She was, you know, she just looked fucking terrible, and my brain just couldn't cope with it. I couldn't deal with it. You know, the woman that had brought me into this world, and the woman that had, you know, done so much for me, sacrificed her whole life for me, was just falling apart in my hands, and there's nothing I could do. All I could do is just look on at my family and try and support them, and, you know, and it was a mess. It really was. It tore the family to bits for a while, and you know, I'd always had such a great, strong family base, and to see Mum go through that, and see my sisters and my niece, and, you know, my nieces and my nephews, and definitely my dad. You know, my dad was obsessed with my mum, and to see him go through that there was no great relationship that I'd ever seen than what my parents had, and to see him go through that was just fucking heartbreaking. It really was.
After the loss of his mother, Ben struggled with day-to-day life and began using cannabis to block out his depression and anxiety. But ultimately, this made his mental health issues worse.
You know, I went about it in the wrong way. You know, I started abusing cannabis a lot, and that is not helpful. You know, despite what people might tell you to believe, too much of anything's terrible, and too much of that was terrible for me. And, you know, it was about 18 months into it. You know, I remember being at work, and I was suffering with a lot of health anxiety at the time. I was, you know, after watching Mum go through that, I started to fixate on my health a lot, and, you know, I'd managed to convince myself that something was badly wrong with me, and it came to a head while I was at work, and I felt like my chest was, you know, my heart was pumping out my chest, and I thought I was having a heart attack. It was like that scene on Analyze This when Robert De Niro is thinking he's getting a heart attack, and you know, he ends up, you know, almost going crazy with it, you know, and you know, he had no appreciation for the physical aspect of anxiety. You know, I'd wake up with nightmares, with night terrors, just repetitive thoughts. Like my mind was in a place where it was falling to bits. It was, you know, I work in IT, and I always liken it to, you know, my CPU was overheating, and my brain, you know, I needed to shut my brain down, and my brain had come back up and reset, but it had gone into safe mode. You know, nothing was working right. Even my vision was wrong, you know. And yeah, from then on in, it was hell for 3 to 4 months. I disassociated myself from my kids, from my family. You know, it was something I couldn't help. I looked in the mirror, I couldn't even recognize myself. I felt nothing. I felt nothing for no one, nothing for my kids. And people who know me know I'm a very emotional guy, you know. And to not feel something for my kids, but to know at the same time that it was wrong, and what I was feeling was wrong, it was the worst thing in the world. It ate me up day and night, and that's when I knew I needed to get help. I needed to talk to someone, and I needed medication. I remember thinking at the time, I was like, this is it, I'm done. You know, nothing's going to be like the way it was, and I'd kind of resigned myself to failure. You know, and that's when the suicidal thoughts crept in. You know, I wanted to end it. I'd never put myself, you know, in that position before. I'd never felt anything like that before, and And I was so disassociated from everyone and felt so little for everyone and knew that was so wrong that I just thought, I've got to end it. I'm no good for anyone.
Ben gathered up the courage and turned to his doctor for help. He was given medication and assigned a counsellor.
It wasn't until I accepted help that I started really talking about it with my friends and with a counsellor and with my GP. And they put me on some medication called sertraline. And he said, this isn't a quick fix, this isn't the answer, but this is going to get your place in a head where this is going to get your head in a place where you can really start to figure things out, where, you can start to piece your life back together. Because I couldn't even think at the time, it was like being stuck in a panic attack permanently and not being able to get out of it, blurry vision, racing thoughts, and, no amount of talking or therapy at that time was going to help me unless I could get on this medication and get my head straight. And I'll tell you what, for all the bad stuff you hear about it and all the, the kind of negative stigma attached to SSRIs, it saved my life. It really did. I remember, thinking it was all over, thinking I was done. And about 4 weeks into the medication, I was walking down the road and it just hit me, that I actually feel all right. It was doing its job. I remember, punching the air like with joy because I couldn't believe, that I had actually started to feel normal again. I could look at my kids again and I could feel hope, I could feel love, I could, look at my wife and feel like I could be something useful again, And I remember punching the air and thinking, oh my God, this is it, I'm back. And for me, that instance there of being that low, and even though I'd not done any real work from it other than admit my problems and get some help from my GP and get on the antidepressants, even in that moment, I knew that even if I had to be on these things for the rest of my life, that this was okay, because anything was better than what I was. And I knew at that point that was hope, man. Having that grain of hope, that grain of normality again made me think, do you know what, no matter what I go through now, I know that this isn't forever. I know I can beat it.
Ben still struggles to this day, but has found comfort in talking and accepting help.
You think you're done, you think you're down and out. You're not. You are not down and out. I'm telling you, there are ways around this, whether it's medication, whether it's exercise, whatever it is. Never expect a quick fix. But, as long as you can talk to someone about it, as long as you can accept that help, as long as you can, get the help from your doctor, get the help from your friends, as long as there's something that you can get some positivity out of, I guarantee you that you're not a waste of space. You're not a loser. You're not pathetic. You're worth something. And the brain's a beautiful thing, man. And sometimes it's with that beauty comes a fragility that gets exposed. When you put through the mill, when you put through shit. And you do just need to hit that reset button, man. And, as bad as it gets, there's a way out, I'm telling you. And it's not suicide, it's not drugs, it's not alcohol, it's not those destructive habits, that you use to cope and escape. It's through openness, transparency, being strong as well at the same time, and being stoic and accepting help, And I'll tell anyone that 1,000 times till they're blue in the face, it's not over, man. Like, you can give so much, you really can. And you just need to stick with it.
The total number of British soldier fatalities during the conflict in Afghanistan now stands at 456, much higher than Iraq, which stands at 178. 2009 was the bloodiest year for British troops fighting in Afghanistan against the Taliban. Martin joined the British Army in 2003 and served 3 tours on the front line in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq.
There's definitely sort of certain points in the tours that will never go away. You know, there's times we did do an operation on my first tour out on Herrick 7 when it was very much still cowboys and Indians. You know, it's still proper war fighting sort of tour. Up around Musakala, which is a big town up in sort of the last Taliban stronghold up in the north of Helmand province. Up there, working sort of alongside the American Airborne, and just watching the town just get absolutely destroyed. You know, some proper sort of street to street, nitty gritty sort of stuff, and going in and witnessing the aftermath of that. It's not so much a haunting. You know, I mean, I'm lucky in a respect. You know, I didn't get flashbacks as such. I don't get nightmares about it, but it's always there.
Trauma from being in extreme, high-intensity combat on the front line and unable to switch off from it all, Martin slowly turned to alcohol and drugs to deal with the experiences.
It was my only way of switching off. It was very much more a hypervigilance thing than, you know, an actual sort of a single traumatic incident or whatever. So I was just filling my head with anything I could get my hands on, just to obliterate myself, and because that was the only way I could relax. If you imagine, if you take a spring and you coil it and you compress that spring and you leave it compressed for months and months or years at a time, when it finally goes, it don't go back to the same shape, you know. And that's basically what happened to my brain. It was so wound up for so long, I just couldn't relax. And the only way I could relax was, you know, by getting totaled, by getting completely smashed. So.
While hitting a hard time in his life, Martin had strong thoughts of suicide.
I always thought suicide was like, you know, the sort of easy way out, and that's not the way I do things, you know. But yeah, there was one time I was going through a particularly sort of low spot, waiting to go to court, all this sort of stuff. And yeah, I decided I'd made my mind up I was going to do it. It was one of these, it was a bit sort of a drunken sort of spur of the moment type of thing. I'm lucky I was sort of around good people. You know, I'm lucky enough to call my bros, you know, who were there at the time. They sort of said, "No, you're not, mate," and you come back to my house and you're cuddling my dog. It's like, that sounds like a really good idea. And I had a bit of a meltdown after that, you know. I'd decided what I was going to do. I was going to sit and go walk about and sit at the edge of the cliffs and chuck myself off, you know. And that was how I was going to do it, but no, it didn't happen. I was lucky in a way.
The reeds that are laid down, come 3 fingers to the left, the black dish dash, walking left to right, just been pointed out by the MP to me.
When he realised he needed help, he contacted his old battery commander, who then got in contact with PTSD Resolution. They put Martin in contact with a specialist in Guernsey called the Grove Clinic.
I was absolutely amazed that there was something like that. He was the first person I'd ever talked to about stuff when I wasn't completely off my dial.
There, he got the support he desperately needed.
And I remember walking out of there the first time, feeling like I'd been punched in the brain. You know, it was like a weight had lifted, but my head was scrambled. I just almost walking around in a bit of a daze. But the next morning, I woke up, I was like, oh, I feel better now. I feel better. And I've had a couple more sessions, and then more and more. And when he sort of told me what was wrong, and I could sort of put that in my male logic way of thinking, my male logic brain. This is wrong. This is what I need to do to fix it.
Martin had no idea that the help was there. He thought he was alone.
It wasn't until like a couple of years later, you know, I started sort of really going and sort of filling my face with drugs and drinking all the time, that sort of stuff. It wasn't until afterwards, but I didn't ask for help. I think originally, if I'd have identified something was going wrong, instead of I'm all right, I'll just take more pills. It's the bloke thing, isn't it? It's the I'm all right, I can deal with this, I'll do it my own way, I don't need any help, I'm fine. Especially with the sort of squaddy mentality behind it, so I don't need anybody's help. You know, it's that that sort of drove me forward through, you know, sort of, I'll be all right, I'll sort myself out, I don't need any help. But I think if I'd have asked for it, it's there now. I genuinely think it's getting better.
That's what we're doing now. We're going to push around the side of this compound, push the lads to the side due to the fact that we're getting quite a lot of high readings on the Vallon. Once we've pushed around the side of the compound, you're clear. Push further north to the next set of compounds, which is through a tree line. Beyond that, we're possibly told that's where the insurgents are.
With post-traumatic stress disorder on the rise, 71 British soldiers and veterans took their own lives in 2018 alone.
I joined the army at 15 and 7 months, you know, the earliest you can start your application. And then I was sent off to training and joined my unit at a very, very young age, and then was sent out to Afghanistan at the age of 18. You know, I think it was 2 or 3 days after my 18th birthday I was sent off. The traumas that we all suffered there were just indescribable. They were just, you know, they were the worst things that human beings can see and witness and experience. And at an age of, like, you know, someone at 18 years old, when you're quite absorbent to your surroundings, it's tricky. My departure from the British Army came when I was at my most exciting part of my career. I was, you know, really getting into my stride and really learning to love it, and I was medically discharged. It was out of nowhere. I was given maybe 2 months before I was marched off of the camp. So that's when the problems of depression, addiction, the mountains of debt that I sort of racked up as a result of that sort of really started to happen. I missed my friends, I missed the excitement, the adrenaline, and then, you know, drugs happened and addiction happened, which was just, that just spiraled out of control. I mean, ridiculously fast. And then it was homelessness. I was homeless on the streets of London for 9 months, and then, you know, the suicidal thoughts came. I remember considering hanging myself. I've had razor blades to my wrist, all sorts of different sort of things and ways that I was, you know, going to consider doing it. It's very difficult for someone from a military background to sort of introduce their issues and problems that they've suffered with into sort of civilian life. You can always talk to your friends and either that you've served with, or you can talk to people that have also served. There's a guy who's an author who I spoke to, reached out to me on Instagram, and we sort of clicked straight away, just because, you know, we'd experienced similar things. And a lot of the time civilians don't often understand, and it's not, you know, they're not expected to understand, but it's never a case of, you can't really relate the kind of things that you've seen, experienced, and done. You know, things like smells and noises are all triggers that sort of take you back. Often as well, especially with, you know, when I left the military, with my, you know, the age I was when I joined and when I left, I was still very young. And the amount of stuff that I'd done in that short, you know, 6.5, 7 years of being a soldier was enormous. And the places that I'd been and the things that I'd done, the places I'd seen, there was a stigma attached to me being a soldier. And people naturally assumed that you're a soldier, you need to be strong and you need to be a particular type of person. And that was very toxic. It wasn't them that was thinking that, it was me that was thinking that. It was me that was thinking, people are going to think that I'm weak if I have problems, if I have issues, if I have these thoughts and these things in my brain and my mind that I can't cope, that I'm weak and I'm pathetic and I'm not really worth talking to about these issues and things like that. And a lot of the time, you know, it was quite honestly the opposite. I tried therapy, counsellors, psychiatrists, and I was far too angry and far too afraid of admitting to my self and anybody else that I was damaged in any way. You might have survived the war in Afghanistan, but you come home and you fight a completely separate war. And not a day goes by that I don't think about the guys that we lost. And they, you know, it sucks, quite honestly, to have never be able to, you know, speak to them again, or you know, go back and maybe something was different. Recovering from these things, I don't think for me personally, I'll ever fully recover. It's about how you deal with it and move forward, about how, you know, talking to people, you know, a problem shared is a problem halved. You know, I couldn't agree with that more. If I can talk to someone about the issues that I suffer, and if I can talk to like-minded people that have been through depression or, you know, suicidal thoughts or addiction, and for whatever reason, I can relate. It's 10 years this October since that Afghan tour that changed all of our lives. So recovery is not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. Everybody recovers in different ways and at different paces. When you actually do find the courage or the ability, or even just the person to talk to, it really is a weight lifted from your shoulders. And finding, whether it's sobriety or following a dream or being able to be comfortable enough around somebody to just let them know just how dark it was, whatever your condition or whatever your experience is, can change your life.
Someone with PTSD often relives the traumatic event through nightmares and flashbacks, and may experience feelings of isolation, irritability, and guilt. It can develop immediately after someone experiences a disturbing event, or it can occur weeks, months, or even years later.
PTSD, because it's a complicated, it's a complicated thing. PTSD, it's not like you've got the flu, or it's not like you've got, you know, a cold. Everybody's got different sort of facets to it.
I don't think anybody alive today doesn't suffer trauma or some sort of, you know, depression or PTSD. It's not just soldiers. It's not just people that have been abused. It's any sort of trauma that you may have suffered in any way, shape or form. So I think, you know, making sure that we all are on that sort of page and understanding that, like I say, problem shared is a problem halved.
People think that just because someone's in the military, that, you know, that they're the ones that are going to have PTSD. But, you know, I would argue that PTSD is, I mean, you break it down, it's post-traumatic stress. You know, it's stress you're going to get after something traumatic. It's as simple as that. If somebody witnesses someone get run over by a bus, you know, someone might think, not be affected by that. Another person, you know, it might completely ruin them, and it might come back to haunt them day in, day out for years to come. Everybody's different, and everybody's susceptible in different ways, you know. It's very much on the individual. The individual needs to find a coping mechanism, but more importantly as well, the individual has to want to fix it.
The things that you suffer from are very real, and they do follow you, and they never leave.
The biggest thing for me was coming to terms with what's happened and kind of putting it to the back of my mind and accepting that it's always there, and the grievance is never going to stop, and the incident and the flashbacks are never going to stop, because PTSD doesn't stop. Until you've been put into that situation or a life-changing event, people can't relate, which is why the people in the armed forces can relate to each other, because they understand. So 9 times out of 10, for me, and speaking with close friends who also suffer with PTSD, the best way that they can vent their frustrations or their sadness or anger, and to ease the pain and suffering, is by speaking to their friends who have been in similar situations. For civilians who go through PTSD, probably don't know already, but you probably do it speaking to close friends and families and relatives about the loss of someone within the family or an incident, and hopefully that gets it off your chest, because if you express it and you let out all your frustrations and your anger, you don't let it build up and then just explode.
Earlier this year, David realised how much he was struggling and desperately needed help and support.
It began like really bad this year and last sort of 6 months. In the past I'd had issues where I'd felt like things were getting on top of me. I'd always managed to suppress them, which I think probably long term has probably done a lot more damage than I ever thought.
In 2011, David lost his mother from liver failure. Today, he still finds it hard to accept.
And probably something that I've never dealt with properly. It's not something I really talk about openly. Being removed from that situation as well, you know, not being around family, being out here. It was hard for me to kind of have that family circle around me at the time.
Earlier this year, David realised how much he was struggling and desperately needed help and support.
There was two things that happened that kind of made me realise that I needed to do something, and that was one night where I just went down Salary Corner, jumped over the wall, sat on the rocks there, just waiting and waiting and waiting. I think in my haste, didn't realise the tide was going out, but I guess it gave me time to think and just time to realise that I needed to make a change rather than just walking away from my son and my dad and my brothers and people that cared for me.
These days, David looks at life in a more positive way. It's important for him to have goals, to keep focused.
You know, I've started things like the gym, so enrolling at the gym and going 3 or 4 times a week. Setting myself challenges like the Ultra next year has really helped as well. Doing the Rotary Walk, having something to aim for, those little goals.
And to spend time with his son.
Getting good at riding your bike now.
Daddy, can we go look at the dam?
Of course we can.
Since I've been living on my own, my time with him has become so precious, and our relationship has actually grown to something that's amazing now, and it's something that I never had before with him, and it's just the best feeling in the world.
Then he can put on man down?
Yeah, mate, you remembered the title? How did you know that?
Oh, I love you, mate.
I love you.
I love you.
Is it nice seeing Daddy happy?
Yes.
Because I wasn't very happy before, was I? But now we have lots of fun, don't we?
Yeah.
It's just, and listening to him laugh, it's like the greatest thing in the world.
Come on, Daddy. Look. I'm so jumping off. Dad, this is how far as I'm going, and that's all go.
He opened up to the Man Club, who recommended he spoke to family and friends, telling them about his struggles.
Since I've found some people on Man Club, since I've started talking to a few other people that are quite close to me, yeah, I'm not sure that they get it 100%. I'm not sure that they feel the pain I feel, or they maybe don't empathise with the pain I feel, because I think sometimes it's the way I explain why I feel the way I feel, because in my head all this stuff's built up and built up and built up, and it feels like my world is absolutely crashing, but then when I go to vocalise it to others, I just seem really pathetic, and then that kind of just snowballs and makes me feel even worse. If someone's feeling like no one's there for them, or if someone's feeling like they can't talk to someone else, then they're telling themselves a lie, because there'll always be someone there that will listen. There's places you can go, there's people you can talk to.
The Man Club has been going for 2 years now, and the charity is growing day by day.
It's a space for men to come and just talk or just listen, and that's really where the the power comes from. We use a very powerful Native American tradition. It's a talking stick, which this is actually a didgeridoo, but at the time we wanted an object, and this has stuck ever since. Even holding it now as I speak, I can feel the sort of the power of what this object, this didgeridoo stick, what it can do.
When a man chooses to hold the stick, no one may interrupt him. It's the opportunity for him to speak the truth, to say how he feels and what he may be going through.
When he's finished, he can put the talking stick down, and he's got a choice. He can either say, "That's me, I'm done, don't want to move on," or he may ask the men that are there for some support, for some words of encouragement. And quite often as well, we have a little round of resonation, where there's normally, pretty much every time, there's a guy there that can in some aspect relate to what you're feeling. And then men generally find that with that resonation, the overriding message every time is that you're not alone.
The idea first came about when Philip's living room turned into a meeting area for friends to talk about their own problems and ask for advice.
When we sat down and started talking with each other, we found that by mutual sharing and listening, that something special was in that space. When we decided to, well, let's put it out there and see if we can invite other guys into that space, it quickly started to grow.
After getting in contact with Guernsey Mind, following a growing interest in the club, Man Club soon got off the ground with a bigger permanent premises.
This week as well, we've expanded further because the numbers are growing such, and we're moving to a weekly slot, and we've now got the Val Recreation clubhouse to use on a weekly basis from May, which is really exciting, and that's going to be a real big step forward, because it's a space that I guess it kind of encapsulates what we had in my living room. It feels a bit blokey, it feels, it's got a pool table, nice kitchen, and you can have 120 people in that place, if you really wanted to.
The Man Club members often meet for early morning sea swims to clear the mind and strengthen their brotherhood.
I managed to talk to a few people that helped me. And ultimately, I sit here now with this strong routine of crazy thing is sea swimming helps me. Once I got talking to people and I found a support network around me, it changed my life again, and it made me believe in myself a little bit more, made me see the positive things in life that I've always seen. But for a good year and a half, 2 years, I could not see the positive in anything. I would have given up on life, on myself. Nothing could get me out of it, not even my children. It was horrible. I would have closed my company that I'd had for 16 years and given up on everything, letting other people down because I just couldn't fix myself.
Suddenly, for the first time in life, there's a whole room of guys that are going to actually listen to you, and I can't think of many places where you go where you can get that. If you think, I know from my own experiences when I went through my own problems, go to the pub. Generally, sort of the way of dealing with stuff was to drink, really. You go to the pub, for example, and you can chat to a mate, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to try and give you advice. They're going to try and tell you what to do. Half the time, the advice is useless or just drunken rubbish. And in the end, you just cover it up with talk about Lionel Messi and stuff like that, which is what we do so often. So to actually have a load of guys that will actually listen to you, and it's not about the advice, it's just knowing they got your back, is just the most powerful thing I've ever experienced in my life.
I can't really describe to anyone until you've kind of been to a meeting, and you don't have to be unwell to go to a meeting. It's literally a forum for men that need to just maybe blow off some steam. You learn that there are people that have been through similar things, and have been in a similar place. And also we have a laugh, we take the piss out of each other, and there's real value in being able to laugh at yourself, even in the most hardest times that you'll go through. And yeah, Man Club offers so many different forms of therapy for so many different people. I'm just disappointed that I didn't know about it a year ago.
The guys that attend Man Club, it doesn't matter what age you are, doesn't matter what background you're from, whether you're unemployed, you're a director of a finance business, anybody can go. And I've made friendships throughout.
So if I was to talk about Man Club and say to men it's about mental health, a lot of them probably wouldn't really, they'd be like, what? If I was to say Man Club is guys that are going through relationship breakdowns, trying to see their kids, job losses, stress, talking about the sexuality, prejudice, I could go on and on, there's just off the top of my head. But if I said about that, then suddenly, oh great, what we often don't relate is that the problem that we're so often trying to fix is actually having an effect on how we're feeling. And that's a weird concept. Even talking about this now is it's hard to get that together, but it is the same. So you go through something, everyone's been through something, you've lost a loved one, everyone has, or whatever it might be. It affects you, you feel a certain way, and sure, you might get through it, you might be okay, you might, quite often you do, but it's a hell of a lot easier when there's a guy, there's a group of guys that are behind you and are not going to judge you. That's something I should say, it's non-judgmental, and that people can relate. And of course, having that there, and then what that does, once you've been there and done that, you get that kind of, that real drive to then be there for others as well. And if you've been helped, by the guys and you want to help again, and it just grows and grows. There's a real passion for that in the guys. And yeah, it becomes a real driving force for the club. There's nothing more powerful than sharing your vulnerability and sharing with a group of lads and knowing it's all right. It's amazing.
I wanted to make a documentary, a video, so people can watch it when at the lowest point. Well, not even just that, just when they want to know where to get the help and support from. So with this documentary I've created, you've got the Man Club in there. It's an incredible place for any walks of life. I don't think there's anything that powerful on this island where men can go and talk confidentially, knowing that each of those guys in that room has your back. I mean, it is a fantastic place, and I highly recommend any man going through any troubles to join that club. It is brilliant. I was in quite a low point of my life when my mother passed away. I remember the day like it was yesterday. It was a Friday afternoon. I was actually at my platoon commander's house at the time because I was about to go on promotional course the following week. A normal day, it was sunny, summer's day, it was lovely, barbecue, a couple of beers.
You look fine. Wow. Oh no, come on, not now. No, I'm not even dressed.
When we were driving back, I got a call from my dad. He said, I need you to pull over. I need to speak to you. It wasn't until I got back to my camp I answered the phone, and my dad told me basically that my mother passed away. I just remember it. I felt like the walls were caving in around me. I literally stumbled up to my room in a ball of tears. I just didn't know what to do. It just didn't feel right. It didn't feel real. I collapsed in one of my mate's arms and I just broke down. I was able to drive up to Newcastle and give them compassionate leave straight away. In that trip, it was a 7-hour drive, but that 7 hours felt like a month. I eventually got there, and it was the next morning. I was able to see my mother in the chapel of rest. Seeing her in that way, it really broke me in half, really. That was the realisation that, you know, she had definitely gone, because before that, I just denied it. Just holding her body when it was cold. It's a feeling that I'll never forget. But it was closure in a way that I was told that she passed away in her sleep, in her own bed, without any pain. The policeman found her 4 days later, still, you know, as you would in your bed, curl up nicely. During my time in the army, you know, I was loving my job at the time, very passionate. I was a highly respected soldier at the time. But after my mum passed away, that was it. I had no interest in the career anymore. I just want to be home around family and friends for that support network that I really, really needed at that time, because I was lost. The only way I could describe it, for me, it was like I was in a forest. I don't know where I was in that forest. There was fog all around me. I didn't have a map, didn't have a compass. I was so lost that I eventually got help from the NHS. They put me through to a doctor who gave me medication at the time. And that was a very, very big thing for me, because I've never taken those sort of things in my life. But months went on and I had a lot more clarity in my life, and things started to come back together. And I realised, you know, that she had gone, and I had to do something to make her proud. And for me, video work is that. My mum liked my work, you know, and that's given me some drive in life. And that's one reason why I'm creating this documentary, because I've been in that low point in my own life, and I thought if I can share my experiences, you know, help somebody else along the line, then I've achieved my goal, really. I left the army in March 2017. I moved back to Guernsey and I got a job working as a prison officer. You know, being around everyone was just brilliant, having a structure in life again. It was great. You know, my mum's gone now, but I could look up and make her proud, especially making this documentary. It's good to talk to people and, you know, realise that it is okay to have these feelings sometimes. It's completely normal. What I've learned from this documentary is that everyone shares similar stories. You know, they've come from a very dark time in their life. They then got the support network and they've come out the other end in a much better, positive place. And for me to hear those 3 stages, it gives me great satisfaction that I've not only got that on video to show others, but knowing that person is in a better place now. I mean, yeah, not every day is going to be perfect for them or myself, but you know, they're on the right way, the right path to life to get better.
The emergency services are on the front line saving lives every day. They have to be prepared to deal with trauma on all levels and make life or death decisions in seconds.
Most of the stuff that we go to, so obviously nobody calls a fire service usually if you're having a good day. We're there for pretty much when the wheels are falling off and there's no one else to go. Certainly things like complicated road traffic collisions where people are entrapped by injuries or entrapped by debris. obviously when you get to those types of incidents, they can be pretty traumatic.
Both the fire and ambulance services treat cardiac arrests on scene with time and conditions against them.
Any cardiac arrest we now respond to. Any cardiac arrest is a traumatic incident. Obviously you're trying to bring that person back to life. The kind of fire service mentality, the way that everything works is upstairs around the mess table, basically wherever we have our lunch, where we have our tea, where we have our briefings. Whenever we have a big incident or a traumatic incident, we'll all usually sit down and actually have a proper chat about it. It's just kind of a way for us to normalise what's happened, and because I mean it's never a nice thing to go to see, it's never a nice thing to go and do. However, we do it regularly, and it's just kind of normalising and making it easy to process, so you've got a way to kind of understand what's happened and realise that it is horrific. Like, there's a way to deal with it and a way to kind of process it. You'll end up responding to certain jobs, and there are guys who have done it day in, day out for 20, 25 years and gone horrific incident after horrific incident. And actually, it will just take one incident to trigger that, where you realise that actually this is quite difficult, I don't understand, and your brain basically shuts down and says, I'm not going to deal with this now. And it can happen at any time, but it's weird. It doesn't have to be it's not the most traumatic incident you've ever been to. It could literally just be that one thing. We're in quite a lucky position where we are kind of a bit of a family here, and we're all designed to look after each other. And I think that's kind of certainly how I think that us as a fire service deal with it well. Our breakdown is just being open and honest with each other, and just kind of basically going upstairs talking about it, or going to the pub after shift. And we're just in a lucky position because we do all talk about it. I know everyone looks at us, certainly from the outside, and certainly as a predominantly male service, everyone will see this kind of like big kind of macho thing, but actually we do talk, and we talk quite a lot, and certainly with this service anyway, and certainly with the guys I work with, it just makes a nice working environment, and it makes us able to respond to these horrific incidents over and over and over again.
The St John's Ambulance Service is a charity organisation dependent on donations and subscriptions to provide the public with emergency care.
The ambulance service is one of the high-risk professions for mental health problems, and this is research coming out from the UK, and they're finding that ambulance men basically do suffer more health problems mentally than women, whether it's because women are happy to chat about it and men aren't. In the ambulance service, and maybe other emergency service as well, you join it thinking you're going to be the tough guy, but we're all human at the end of the day.
GY, this is Alpha Victor 105. Roger your details. We're going to an 85-year-old female with chest pain.
We deal with between 60 and 70 deaths a year. I think we're averaging about 17 emergency calls a day.
Once the adrenaline wears off, the reality of what they have seen sets in, and it can be difficult to deal with. But still, they push on, ready for the next call out.
It's a busy day sometimes where you're out and you do a difficult job, then you go on to the next job, and you always don't have that occasion to come back and speak to your colleagues in the staff room about the tricky job. I think in the UK that is where they're having huge problems because they are so busy, the ambulance staff. They go and deal with a very difficult job, they clear up, do the paperwork, then they're on to the next job, and they don't get that chance to speak to their colleagues about what they've dealt with. I think if a crew has also gone out to a very difficult, harrowing job, they come back. Sometimes they want to talk about it straight away, sometimes they don't. And you've always got a lot of empathy for those people because you know it could have been you going out and dealing with that job yourself.
My name's John Hawker. I'm a psychotherapist here at the Grove Clinic in St Peter Port in Guernsey, but also I've got a busy practice in the UK, and I'm also a writer and a broadcaster, always around the subject of mental and emotional health.
John Harker from the Grove Clinic has recently co-created a free mobile phone app called Better Stop Suicide.
The app, yeah, Better Stop Suicide. It came out of a conversation with a friend of mine, great chap actually, Peter Grange is a well-known local chap who runs a creative agency, and I know he doesn't mind me sharing the fact that at one point in his life, just like me about 20 odd years ago, he had thoughts of suicide, and we were sat talking about it and talking about technology, and there's an app for this and there's an app for that, and we thought there's no app to help people who are feeling suicidal. And if somebody's suicidal, really they've lost hope. And I'm sure, I always think that if you've got to the age of about 30 and you haven't thought of suicide, you haven't lived, but there's a big difference between that and actually having a plan to kill yourself, because you've really just lost hope. It all seems to be just too much to deal with. And I know from my work over the years that most people who feel suicidal just need to press pause, get some thinking time, because what's happened is their emotional brain has taken over. It's hijacked their thinking brain, and that can happen to any of us. And what we need to do is just press stop and go back to doing some basic things, not make any life-changing decisions. Connect with people, go out and look at the world, do some good calming down breathing, and try and break that. It's this giant cloud of things that seem impossible to sort out. But if we can break them down into bite-sized chunks, invariably we can just help things get better. So what the app is actually designed to do is not just to be downloaded by anybody who's sitting there poised. It's really for people who perhaps have felt suicidal, or perhaps even at some point decided to take their own lives but happily not succeeded in doing so. And then they download the app and really just pre-populate it with some information, some resources that they can get to themselves. And then if they ever get to that crisis point and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and it all just seems impossible and mad, just hit the button and it's there to help you. It's been out about 2 or 3 months now, but it's got really quite a lot of traction and a lot of downloads across the world, actually, a lot in the United States, some in the non-English speaking world. But we've also had 2 people who've been in touch with us just to say, thanks so much, this really did save me, it really just stopped me, and I'm okay now, and I went and got some help and managed to fix my life. So it's great. It's absolutely free of charge, and nobody makes any money out of it. We don't collect any information about you or anything like that. Just download the app. It's called Better Stop Suicide.
The UK Coast Guard are on call 24/7, 365 days a year. For 34 years, Tony served in the Royal Navy and saw action in the Falklands War. He retired in 2007 as a warrant officer. Now he is a paramedic winchman and has attended around 90 traumatic incidents.
One of the things we do in search and rescue, it's not just rescue, it's you see the end results of people taking their own lives. And usually it's down on the south coast of England where we used to get scrambled to jobs, and you knew straight away, as soon as they said, the Coast Guard said it was Beachy Head, you knew what type of job that was going to be. And having done a few jobs down there, the end results are not pleasant, they're never pleasant, and it's always, most of the time, I'd say 90% of the time of those jobs would be body recovery. The way you handle the body, it's not with the greatest of care, because you're in a hazardous situation. You've got to remove them from that hazard, including yourself. What you don't want to become is a casualty as well. We tend to take them off the cliffs in the best way that we can. Sometimes that's double stropping, sometimes that's putting them in body bags and then putting them into stretchers. And we take them to the top of the cliff. On incidents that I've done there, we've done that, and you hand them over to the coroner or to an ambulance crew. It's not a pleasant sight because they've fallen usually about 200 feet, so you can imagine the state that they're in. And it's not until you get back or you hear a follow-up story at the end that you can associate that with being a person, if you like. So it might sound a little bit hard, it might sound a little bit callous, but then you get a thank you letter from people, from families, to say thank you for recovering, and then you realise you have recovered a person there, not a body.
After years in the job, a traumatic incident left him needing support.
We always get offered counselling, and there is a due process for it that we all know about and was well advertised to us. We had a job once where it involved a child in a car accident, and the child died on the way to hospital with massive trauma. You first think, you know, have I done enough? But when you look at the extent of the injuries, and you know it's final, and there's a doctor there with you as well, so you know you've done everything you possibly can. It's that aftermath where I was cleaning the aircraft and disinfecting the area, getting it ready for another job, mopping up a lot of blood. And the pilot turned around to me and said, "You okay, Tony?" And I said, "Not really." And he goes, "No, nor me." What we have in place for that is when we get back, we always have a debrief. Whether it's training, whether it's a job, we sit together as a crew. And particularly on this incident, we need to sit together as a crew. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, made ourselves a cup of coffee, and we sat down and spoke about it. And then it was pretty obvious that we'd been up most of the night anyway, so we were stood down, which was a good thing, because you don't want that playing on your mind for another job. And then the pilot said the captain of the aircraft has a responsibility to the crew to make sure that everything is put in place. And I wasn't going to bother with counselling, but I think I said to him, look, maybe I do need some counselling on this one, which was then arranged. The counsellor came to the base and spoke to us about it. And I'm glad I did, because it helps you deal with the situation. And I only had the one session, but I was offered more sessions, and I felt that the one session was enough, and I still feel that one session was enough. But it was good, the way they get all the information out of you, and it just helps you move on, because you've got to move on, because otherwise you can't do the job.
Day and night, the UK search and rescue team can be called out in any weather conditions, at any moment.
When that alarm goes in the crew room, there's an adrenaline that goes through you. But there's also a euphoria of you knowing you're going to help somebody. It's hard to explain when you go to those jobs, or go to any job, even if it's just a medivac, you know, where you're taking somebody from the Isle of Wight hospital and you're taking them to the mainland hospital, and it's routine. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference what time of day it is. Obviously the ones at the early hours of the morning, you sometimes go, oh. You're asleep and you're woken up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when you're on shift. But then once you get in the aircraft, it kicks in again. That initial buzz is the 3 o'clock in the morning job when you wake up and it's in the North Sea and there's 60-mile-an-hour winds. Because you know it's not going to be an easy job. And of course your life's in danger as well. But I suppose that's part of the adrenaline rush. A young lad, second in command of the yacht, actually a kids training yacht, had slipped backwards while trying to undo a cleat or a rope, and he fell onto a cleat and broke his back. And the only way we could do it was to get him off on a stretcher. And going down to that deck at night, you just know you're going to get tangled up in the rigging, you know that you're going to get hurt. But we got him off safely. We got him to hospital. Really nice letter off the captain. She sent a nice letter from the training boat. He was fine, he's walked again, so we did all the right C-spine control and spine control and to get him off safely. And when you see all the rigging and the deck moving around with the stretcher, it's a difficult thing to do. But again, it was a good result, and you get those nice letters afterwards, which are always good to get. Just for what you're doing in the documentary and the whole point of it, I wouldn't be able to emphasize enough the need to get out and talk to people and get help. Especially as guys, go and get help. Don't be afraid to ask for it, no matter what the situation is, no matter how trivial, because what might be small for you and people might be the loss of your dog, like my brother and his dog, for instance. He's known for 14 years. He will be so massively upset with that. So no matter how small it is, it's affecting that person more than it's affecting anybody else around them. And that's the message I will get across to people, to open up.
% of prisoners across the UK suffer with their mental health. The important thing is to know the difference between mental health and a mental illness. Now, mental health, imagine mental health being like your physical health. Some people are very fit, some people aren't so much, and your mental health is very much the same. But a mental illness is something that is diagnosed to an individual by a specialist person. I'm the senior officer of safer custody here in Guernsey Prison. A big part of my role and my job title is that I look after the individuals here within prison that are suffering with their mental health and giving them someone to talk to and to try and help them through their custodial sentence. I teach the officers on a 2-day training course, not just officers but also external agencies that come into the building, into the establishment, because I want everybody who comes here into prison to have an understanding of mental health and to know what to look out for. And that if you're feeling like an individual is in a bad place, then they know what the appropriate actions are to take. I do what's called SASH training, which is suicide and self-harm, and I also do an introduction to mental health. What I do is I try to get officers to understand how prisoners really must feel when things are going wrong for them. At the end of the day, prisoners deserve a second, third, or fourth chance just like anybody else. You know, we want to rehabilitate them and we want them to work and we want them to go out and get released and to be a good, positive member of the society. On a daily basis, officers, although we try to help prisoners, officers on a daily basis will be confronted by prisoners and go through a tough time, whether it's a matter of using force or dealing with a major incident. You know, whether someone has attempted suicide or a major incident of self-harm, or they feel that they can't cope with it. And 12% of prison officers across the UK have suffered with their mental health and have been signed off work due to work-related stress within the prison environment. So can you imagine what it must feel like? You go in your cell and an officer slam the door shut. Officer can go home at the end of the day and see his family and socialise with his friends. Yet that individual, the prisoner in the cell, is feeling lonely and upset and feeling sorry for themselves after they've lost everything.
A grieving mother lost her son Joshua on the 25th of April 2017. He was only 26 years of age, leaving his 5-year-old son behind.
I normally hear from Josh every day. We message each other, or we'd meet up once a week. I messaged him in the morning and he didn't answer, and I thought he's probably busy. I was really busy at work anyway. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I got a phone call from the police to ask if I was Josh's mum. I said yeah, and if I knew where he was, and I said he's at work. She said he wasn't, and that there'd been quite a concerning letter brought to the police station. I asked what was in the letter, and she couldn't say, but she said she needed to see me. Got home, she arrived, and she asked, had I seen him? I said no. Did I know where he was? I still said I thought we'd be at work. She said no, they checked. I went to his flat and there were some police officers there and they were trying to do a forcible entry, and then they stopped. And I asked why they'd stopped.
The police stood down their search after finding her son's body.
Police officer recommended I go home and I contact the station, so I did. And the police officer said she needed to come and talk to me. I phoned my daughter because I've got young children that need to be picked up. It was holiday club at the time. And she kind of knew by the tone of my voice there was something seriously not right. So made a pretext to come home first. She said I was hysterical on the phone. I don't remember. And I can remember really clearly taking the washing off the line before they got here, and I can remember saying, please God, don't hurt my son. And the other side of me, it's weird, it's like there's two of you. The other side of me was like, don't be so ridiculous, you know, he's just been a prat, or he's gone off somewhere because he's, you know, whatever, because again, but there's this just awful feeling, you feel like you're made out of lead. And then the police officers arrived and said, oh, it's bad news, I'm afraid. We found a body. I don't really remember much after that, for quite a bit. I can remember my daughter had to go off and she waited until all of my other daughters arrived and she had to go off and get the kids. Because obviously we had to tell the kids, the younger kids. And then you have to go through all the processes. So my daughters were really good because I was not capable of doing a huge amount. So they made the phone calls to the immediate family. And then the next day, you have to give a statement to the police. And then the next day, I did the formal identification. I have to say, up until the point of doing the formal identification, you think, you hope that it's a mistake. And then you go in to do the formal identification and I remember thinking, shit, you're really dead. I think for all of us, the shock, it's massive. It's still, we're 2 years on and it's still, it's like yesterday, it's like today, 5 minutes ago now. Because we can't believe that someone that's such a massive part of the family isn't here anymore. He's a really big personality and he was the oldest. And everything we do, there's always someone missing. Now, always.
His family haven't been the same since he took his own life.
His son was 5 when he died. He doesn't understand. So sometimes he asks when he's coming back. We play him recordings and videos so that he remembers his voice. Because when you're 5, you're not going to have a lot of memories from 5 to an adult. But all of those landmark things that a parent should see, riding your bike for the first time, learning to swim, all of those things, The person that should be having my grandson's back isn't there to have those landmark things, and that's the most important person. So it's not, there aren't words to express that. You can't replace that. You can't quantify it. We know that Josh had been the victim of domestic abuse. In a previous relationship. And we know that it wasn't the same after that. It put a mark on him. It wasn't the same. To the point where he's, I suppose, mind snapped really. And he wanted to be killed by police officers. Actually, he went outside with a fake BB gun. And he wanted to be killed. And myself and my daughter, one of my daughters, went outside and calmed him sufficiently, taking an overdose as well. The time my son served in prison, he got a lot of mental health help and support. And I have to say, it's the best I've seen him looking for a very long time. He came out of prison, he was very much into his fitness. He was about to do a white collar fight. His first white collar fight. He's really excited about that. He had a good job. And he was doing really, really well. Really, really well. I think when someone dies, there's always the tendency people canonise them. Josh was a human being, and he was a character, full of fun. His favourite phrase was living the dream. Loved playing practical jokes. Really loved his brothers and sisters. He was the oldest of 7. Always wanted to take the boys for runs, trying to get them fit. Loved playing practical jokes on the girls. Had nicknames for all of them. Made the best cup of tea in the world, and he was a kind boy. One of his friends needed to go to work at the airport at like 5 o'clock in the morning. My son didn't live near her, had no reason to get up at that point, but would get up at 4 to ensure she got to work for 5. He wasn't a person that publicised these things. From my perspective, I had surgery and I'm quite funny about floors being cleaned and stuff, and he would come after work, help out with the kids, couldn't walk at this point, put loads of tile clean and stuff so that my grout was white. You know, I mean, he did a manual job, he would have been tired, and there he was doing my floor at 10 o'clock at night. You know, he was just a good boy. And I know every parent says that, but I say that to you, at times he could be a pain in the rear. He could be, you know, same as I can be. But he was a genuinely loving son. And I was very, very lucky. When you have children, they're always in your head, always. But he's here every day. There's not a particular... I think about him all the time. I miss him terribly. And we all have a duty of care to each other. Even if you think someone's not really going to hurt themselves, you must act on it. Because the destruction to that person's loved ones when they're gone is immeasurable. It has destroyed our family. Absolutely destroyed it. And I think it's very easy sometimes to turn away. But you know what? Even if you don't want to deal with that, even if if you don't want to alert the police because you're scared you get them into trouble or you into trouble, contact a friend of theirs or a family member, because somebody somewhere will pick that button up and run with it, because that person is loved immeasurably by someone. And he really, truly was and is. You know, cuts and bruises heal, mental trauma doesn't. Several years ago, I have joined a charity. It's a new charity on the island. It's called Humankind. And it's a charity for men who suffer from domestic abuse or parental alienation, because again, it's that age-old, as I've said, myth really that only women have domestic abuse. It's not. It's an abuser is an abuser. It doesn't matter what skin they wear, whether it's a male or female skin. It's in here. And if I can support, or we as a charity can support a man, so they don't end up like this, one person even, then actually, at least I've done something. If I had known, or my children had known, we could have saved him. Without a shadow of a doubt, we could have saved him. I know I could have saved him. I think my son's death was a cry for help that was ignored, and we got an open verdict in the court, which is obviously, everybody knows court is evidence-based. It's not, whilst they have sympathy, it's based on what they see. No one believes that my son intended to take his life, I think. Had we been alerted, or had any friends been alerted, we could have saved him. And that's really hard to deal with, both for me and for, his other brothers and sisters, because it's avoidable and preventable.
Is it alright if I stay today? Is it alright if I stay today? Take my time, far behind, leave my pride. Oh, is it alright if I stay? Is it alright if we just stay today? Is it alright? 'Cause I wish we could just stay. Take our time, far behind, leave our pride. Oh, is it alright if we stay? Is it alright if I decide but change my mind? Is that okay?